Now we're going to talk about cameras. And you might be saying, well, we've been using cameras this whole time, haven't we? We're using this perspective camera. I can press F5 and look at all these other cameras, and we have been. But you can also create cameras yourself that you can animate, that you can change all the attributes of. So let's try doing that. So if we click up here and hold this thing down, we have all these different types of cameras, but the only one we're going to go over now is the regular camera, the camera object. So now we just made this camera, and we're not looking through this camera yet. We're still using Cinema 4D's default perspective camera. And the way we look through this camera is by clicking this little box here. Now we're actually looking through this camera. So we're changing, as you can see now, we see the rotation. And if we move around, now we're changing the coordinates of this camera because we're inside this camera. So now why would you want to use your own camera, make your own camera? Let's create a cube. And if you're into photography or you've done real world filmmaking or photography stuff, you know that you can have different lenses on your camera. And you can do the same thing here in Cinema 4D, except you don't have to buy them. They're free. You just type in a number and you have a different zoom lens or whatever you want. So the way you do that is make our camera active, and you see here where it has focal length. This is your lens. So if you want a 300mm zoom lens, we type in 300, and now we have a super flat zoom lens. You want a really wide lens, let's put in 10. Now we have this super fisheye, super wide angle lens. So you would do this, you would make your own camera if you wanted to create your own custom camera with your own settings. The default, the one that's supposed to be the closest to human vision and just what's known as a standard lens, would be a 50mm. I think Cinema 4D's by default makes 36, but in movies and film and stuff, your 50 is like your standard in photography. But you can choose whatever you want. And we'll go over all this stuff later later on in the series when we do more advanced stuff, but that's just what you would want to know about making cameras. And one other thing, another reason why you would want to make a camera object instead of using the one that's built in, it's if you wanted to animate that camera. So just real basic, we saw how to keyframe stuff before. It's the same with this camera. We'd highlight the camera, we'd press record, and then we would go forward in time and do something to the camera, make sure it's still highlighted, and record another keyframe, and then now we have an animated camera move. So the reasons that you would want to use your own, a custom camera or create your own camera rather than the built-in one is because you want to change its focal length, like you want to put a different lens on it, and you want to animate it. So the thing that goes along with cameras, if we're talking movies and stuff like that, or just setting up your scenes, are lights. So you have a light object here, which you can switch into any of the other types of light objects, and then they give you some shortcuts if you want a spotlight or an area light. But you can turn this light into those other types by changing the type here. So let's first go over an Omni Light. So let's drag this light out here so we can see what it's doing. And so an Omni Light projects light in all directions. So it would be like a sun or something like that, or a flame maybe. So it's projecting light in all directions, and an easier way to see what's going on, and something you're going to want to do if you want to do like realistic lighting, is to go here into the details tab, and you see this fall off here. So this is how the light decays from its origin. So right now there's no fall off, so this light just goes on forever, which a real light doesn't do. And just something to remember, if you want it to act like a real light, just set it to inverse square, this one here, physically accurate. So now we have this range which we can drag. Now this controls the fall off of the light. And to kind of illustrate this better so you can see it, let's go into the create menu, because anything we can create up here, all these different objects, all this stuff here, we can also create from here. Cinema 4D gives you a couple different ways to do things. So we want to use our preset floor object. So let's go into environment and floor. So now we have this floor object. Let's get our cube, bring it up a little bit. And so now you can actually see what the light fall off is doing. Let's bring this light up here. So if we make this bigger, you can see that it just makes our light more powerful and go further. So this controls where the light decays and how far it can go. And you can visualize that with these little circles here. So this is an Omni Light. And by default, this light doesn't have any shadows. In 3D, you have to turn the shadows on. So most of the time, you're going to want to use soft shadows. So we can turn that on, and then now, as you can see, we have this shadow here. And you can move the light around and see what the shadow does. So that's an Omni Light. And at any time here in the type, we can switch the light type. So the two most common you're going to use are Omni and Spotlights. So let's go ahead and switch this into a Spotlight. Now you can see that nothing's illuminated, and as we look, we can see that the spotlight is looking to us like a spotlight. So we would imagine we would have to point this light to whatever we want to light up. So you can move the light around like this and try to rotate it, and oops, undo that, and rotate it and get it to point at what we want. But there's a technique in Cinema 4D that I use all the time that I think is the best way to position lights, and that's that Cinema 4D will actually let you look through a light like a camera. So the way you do that is that you would select your light, and then you would go into cameras, and then you would go to set active object as camera. So now we're looking through the light, but we're controlling it like a camera. So now, and let's switch to a different view so you can actually see it. So now our perspective, instead of our perspective view camera or our other camera, we're looking through this light. So if we move it around, you see that the view here is moving too. So just like the other one, these spotlights have fall off too. And the way you adjust those is by pulling this out. And you can see now the light is reaching further. You see now it's reaching the cube. So here the cube isn't illuminated much, but then we pull the fall off out, now you can actually see the cube lit up. And also you have the outer angle of the light. So if you want a super narrow spotlight, you would make this really small, and if you want it bigger, you would go like this. So let's go back, pressing F1. So now we can actually light this cube by just pointing at it, because we're looking through the light as a camera. And then to go back to our main camera, we would click this button. Now we're back looking through our camera. And if you're going to be lighting like this, what I would recommend, what I like doing, is using the F3 camera as my light or whatever object I want to look through. And I'll show you how to set shortcuts later in the series, so you can set this to keyboard shortcuts to make it really fast. So I like putting my lights or whatever, and we don't see the lighting because we have to go to garage shading. So this quick shading doesn't show lightings, that's why it's faster, so you want to go to garage. And we have our display settings showing different things. You see there's no shadows in this view. So if you can't see the shadows, you would go up here into your options and turn the shadow on. Now there's a shadow. So this one has shadows on already. We can turn them off. Shadows on. So you can flip through these display settings and try some of these different things. So that's how we would use lights with shadows. And I'm just going to go over the basics of these lights. There'll be a more advanced lighting series that I'll be doing if you want to get into the heaviness of lighting, how to do stuff. But so let's just go over a couple little things, and to really see how the lights are working, this is just a preview in the viewport, and it depends on your graphics card. If you want to see what it really looks like, you want to go up here and render it. So go like that, see what it looks like when we render it, or we can press Control R. And what you have here, you have these things called visible lights. So if you actually want to see your light in the scene, which what people would call God rays or volumetric light, or seeing the particulate matter in the light, let's go ahead and go from a side view or something closer to a side view. Let's see what we have here. Let's go to a left view. So now you see these visible light settings. You have none, which is a default, which you can't see the light itself. You only see what it's lighting up. But let's try switching this to volumetric and then see what happens. So now we have some of the light that we can actually see. It's volumetric, so it's mimicking like if there's dust or water vapor in the scene, but it only goes halfway. and we can see what's going on here. So this, oops, so this controls the fall off of the light, how far the light goes. And then this ring here, which is connected to the, if we go to the visibility tab, this is connected to the outer distance. So this is how far the visible light is going to go. So let's pull it all the way through our object. And then now if we render it, we see that we have this visible light going all the way through the scene. So that's how you would have your lights be visible if you wanted to make it look foggy or do anything like that. And then the different settings that you'll see here under the visible light settings, you have volumetric and you have visible, which are the two main ones you're going to use. So visible is a fake volumetric light. So the visible goes all the way through objects and it won't be stopped by the shadows. It's going to be really hard to see in this, but if you look here, this is a visible light, and if we go to the volumetric, it's hard to see here, and it depends on what you're using it for, but volumetric lights will actually stop when they hit something, and visible are fake volumetric lights, so they'll just be the same all the way through. So depending on what you want to do, but visible lights render a lot faster, so if it looks good with visible, use those. Otherwise, you want volumetric, but they take a lot longer to render. And then inverse volumetric, which is going to be hard to see in this example. Let's pull the visibility out even more, see if we can get it. But you see these rays here, so the inverse volumetric, instead of having the visible light come off where the light is illuminating stuff, it's going to be like the light's shadow or whatever, wherever it's blocked, then it shows you volumetric light. So that's handy in some situations, but I rarely use that stuff. And then here we have these basic color controls. So in my advanced lighting, I'll actually show you how to do like cinematic lighting and stuff like that, but you rarely ever want to use a pure white. If you want a cool light, you're going to put a little touch of blue. If you want a warm light, a little touch of yellowish orange stuff there. And this controls the intensity of the light. It's rare that you're going to use 100%. You're going to use little mixtures of lower intensity. And you can have as many lights as you want to get what you want. Usually you want to use as few as possible, because the more lights you have, the longer it takes to render. And here's the shadow settings, which we won't go into here, but just focus on having shadows on or off. We'll go into shadows in the more advanced tutorials and some of these other things too. So there's a couple other different kind of lights, these more advanced lights, but I'll go into those in the advanced lighting thing. To do basic lighting, I'd say with 85% of the stuff you're going to light, you're just going to want to use omnis and spots. So practice using those. Practice looking through the lights to light stuff. It makes it a lot easier than trying to rotate, move these things around. I know in other programs that I've used that don't let you look through the lights, I just have a hard time lighting. Cinema 4D has a lighting tool too, but I didn't find that as intuitive as actually looking through them. And let me see if I can actually find that lighting tool and try that out. So if you want to find something in Cinema 4D, you can go up here to Window, Customization, and if you go to Customize Command, you can type something in here. So I put in lighting. Now it brings me the lighting tool, and if I want to use it, you click Execute down here. This is just another shortcut way to find stuff. So now we're in the lighting tool, and see it kind of floats the stuff around. Here's the controls for it: trackball, surface. We can do stuff like this. So you can try this lighting tool too. Brightness, to see if if this is a better way for you to control the lights, or like this. Actually, it's not bad, aiming the target like this. But I find the best way for me to use it is by actually looking through it. I find that the most helpful. And yeah, so any command you want to find that you can't find it in the program, you can just go Windows, Customization, Customize Commands, and then you can type it in here. It'll bring it up. And if you want to make your own shortcut, like keyboard shortcut, this is something I'll show you later too, but let's say you found this lighting tool, you wanted to use it a lot. Then you wanted to make a keyboard shortcut, let's say Shift L. Then you would say assign, and then now, whenever I press Shift L, now I'm in the lighting tool. So that's just another little something. When I go over how to customize layouts and do your own shortcuts, we'll go over that a little bit more, but that's just a little something now if you want to do that. Because what I like doing is, for this command here, set active object as camera, I like having that set to the L key, so I can just press L to look through my light, or to look through whatever I'm touching actually, but I use it for lights most of the time. And then to go back to your normal camera, you want to go back to use camera default camera. So the way we would set this up to keyboard shortcuts, we would go into our customize commands, and the command we want is set active object as camera. So set active, here it is. And then mine already has L in here, but you would just go type L and click assign. And then the other one we would want is default camera. So we would put default camera, here it is. And then I'm using the semicolon key, or the key that's to the right of the L. So now if we want to jump back and forth from being into our lights to out of them, we just click our light, then click L. Now we're looking through the light, so we can position our light this way. And then if we press a semicolon key, it goes back to our default view, which we were in this camera, so I can go back into that camera like that. And I can go back to the default view from that camera too. Click on this light, press L, back looking through the light, back to semicolon, back to our default camera. So that's just a little something on lights and cameras to show you the basics of how to use those. I'll go into more advanced stuff with the lights and cameras in the cinematic advanced lighting tutorial. But for now, that's just a real quick way to show you how to use your lights and cameras.